One woman never watched television again after Groucho Marx humiliated her on national TV. Joan Rivers spent 28 years exiled by Johnny Carson. And 8 Hollywood careers were destroyed by moments caught on camera, cruelty so shocking, so permanent, that what you're about to see will change how you remember Sinatra, Davis, and every Golden Age legend you thought you knew. Gore Vidal versus William F. Buckley, Jr. August 28, 1968. Chicago's International Amphitheater. The Democratic National Convention had descended into chaos, with protesters battling police in the streets outside, while delegates fought over the future of the party inside. Most networks stuck to traditional gavel-to-gavel coverage, but ABC had taken a gamble. Instead of simply broadcasting the proceedings, they'd hired 2 of America's most brilliant minds to debate the issues live each night. On the left sat Gore Vidal, the acerbic novelist and essayist whose wit could slice through pretension like a scalpel. On the right, William F. Buckley, Jr., the erudite conservative intellectual who'd built an empire on his magazine National Review and his show Firing Line. Both believed themselves superior intellect. Over 10 nights, their mutual contempt built toward an inevitable explosion. The tension was so palpable that ABC producers had started taking bets backstage on when, not if, one of them would finally snap. Some stagehands refused to work the debates anymore, claiming the hostility in the studio was physically uncomfortable. The topic was police violence against protesters. Vidal, defending the demonstrators, compared the police tactics to fascism. Buckley, defending law and order, grew visibly agitated as Vidal pressed his point. His leg bounced under the desk. His jaw clenched. Anyone watching closely could see the veins in his neck starting to bulge. Then Vidal delivered what he thought would be the devastating blow. He called Buckley a crypto-Nazi. The insult hung in the air for a fraction of a second. Host Howard K. Smith, sensing disaster, tried to interject. "Gentlemen, let's..." he started, but his voice faded in his throat. But it was too late. Buckley's face transformed. The sophisticated intellectual vanished, replaced by something primal and ugly. His hands gripped the desk so tightly his knuckles went white. A muscle twitched in his cheek. His voice shaking with rage, he leaned forward and snarled. "Now listen, you queer. Stop calling me a crypto-Nazi, or I'll sock you in your face and you'll stay plastered." The shocked silence lasted only seconds, but it felt eternal. Smith sat frozen, his carefully neutral expression cracking into visible panic. In the control room, the director frantically gestured to keep the cameras rolling. This was television history being made, whether ABC wanted it or not. One camera operator would later say he kept filming, even though his hands were shaking, knowing he was capturing something that would be replayed for generations. Vidal, who'd been trying to provoke exactly this kind of loss of control, wore an expression of satisfied triumph. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs casually, allowed himself the smallest smile. He'd won, and he knew it. 10 million Americans watched one of the nation's leading conservative intellectuals use a homophobic slur and threaten physical violence on live television. The mask of civilized discourse had slipped, revealing the rage and bigotry beneath. Both men were visibly shaken when they signed off that night. In the immediate aftermath, neither could quite believe what had happened. Backstage, they avoided each other completely. Buckley left through a side exit, declining to speak to reporters who'd gathered hoping for more fireworks. Vidal held court with journalists, carefully framing his narrative of what had just happened. Buckley, a devout Catholic who prided himself on his self-control and rhetorical skill, had allowed Vidal to goad him into the gutter. He would call it the greatest failure of his life, not a political defeat or an intellectual error, but a moral collapse. He'd violated every principle he claimed to hold, lost his temper, used a slur he claimed to deplore, threatened violence he'd never actually commit. For a man who'd built his entire identity on self-mastery and philosophical consistency, that loss of control was unforgivable. Friends said he would wake up at night replaying those 8 seconds, wondering what he could have said instead, how he could have maintained control. His wife reported finding him at his desk at 3 in the morning, writing and rewriting responses he could have given, arguments he should have made, ways he could have deflected without losing his composure. The night haunted him until he passed away. Vidal, meanwhile, savored his victory. He would dine out on the story for decades, recounting it at parties, embellishing slightly each time, always positioning himself as the cool intellectual who'd exposed the hypocrite. Their feud would continue for decades through lawsuits, articles, and bitter recriminations, neither man ever truly moving past that August night in Chicago. What made the moment so devastating wasn't just the violence of Buckley's words or the homophobic slur he deployed as a weapon. It was the proof that even the most educated minds could descend to schoolyard cruelty when ego was threatened. These weren't street brawlers or tabloid celebrities. They were public intellectuals men who made their livings through reasoned argument and sophisticated analysis. Television had captured something neither man could take back, spin away, or rationalize. The medium that was supposed to elevate public discourse had instead preserved the moment civilization collapsed in real time. If two of America's most brilliant intellectuals could lose control so completely on camera, imagine what happened when Hollywood's massive egos clashed with no script to protect them. The entertainment industry had spent decades perfecting the art of image management. But television's unblinking eye was harder to fool. And sometimes, the hatred between stars was so consuming that no amount of professional courtesy could contain it. Bette Davis destroys Joan Crawford at Oscars. The rivalry between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford had been simmering for decades by 1963. Both were legendary actresses who dominated Hollywood in the 1930s and 40s. Both had seen their careers fade as they aged out of ingenue roles. Both were bitter about it, and both blamed the other for various professional slights, real and imagined, accumulated over 30 years in the industry. The stories of their mutual hatred had become Hollywood legend. They'd competed for the same roles, the same men, the same magazine covers. Davis had allegedly stolen a boyfriend from Crawford in 1935. Crawford had supposedly lobbied to have Davis fired from a film in 1942. The grievances piled up like kindling, waiting for a match. They'd been circling each other like prize fighters for so long that when someone finally suggested they co-star in a film, Hollywood insiders couldn't believe anyone had the nerve to put them in the same room, let alone on the same screen. When they were cast together in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, a gothic thriller about two aging sisters trapped in a decaying mansion, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The mutual loathing they had to portray on screen required no acting whatsoever. The film was a surprise hit, earning multiple Oscar nominations, including Best Actress for Davis. Crawford wasn't nominated, which only deepened her resentment. She'd call friends late at night, ranting about how Davis had stolen scenes, how the director had favored her, how the entire production had been engineered to make Crawford look inferior. Her assistant would find her watching the film alone in her screening room, making notes on every moment where she felt Davis had upstaged her, building a case that no one had asked for and no one wanted to hear. As Oscar night approached on April 8, 1963, Davis was considered the frontrunner. She delivered a blistering performance, and Hollywood loves a comeback story. She'd already picked out her dress, rehearsed her acceptance speech, called her mother to make sure she'd be watching. The Oscars seemed like a done deal. But Crawford wasn't about to let her rival enjoy the moment. In what can only be described as a masterpiece of vindictive planning, Crawford contacted every other Best Actress nominee and offered to accept the award on their behalf if they won, but couldn't attend. She made the calls herself, one by one, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she explained she just wanted to help, just wanted to be of service, just wanted to make sure the winner had someone to represent them. It took her 3 days to reach all 4 nominees. She was methodical, patient, determined. It was presented as gracious collegiality. In reality, it was calculated sabotage. Anne Bancroft won for The Miracle Worker. She wasn't at the ceremony. She was in New York, performing in a Broadway play, genuinely unable to attend. But Crawford had made sure she had a backup plan if Bancroft won. And there, in front of 50 million viewers watching the live telecast, Joan Crawford rose from her seat. She swept past Bette Davis backstage without so much as a glance of acknowledgement, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. Davis later told friends she could smell Crawford's perfume as she brushed past. Joy by Jean Patou, the most expensive perfume in the world, which Crawford wore like armor. The scent would make Davis physically ill for the rest of her life. She could never walk past a perfume counter without that Oscar night flooding back. Crawford took the stage to thunderous applause, the spotlight she craved washing over her as she accepted the Oscar on Bancroft's behalf. She delivered a gracious, emotional speech, soaking in the adoration of the crowd. She thanked the Academy, thanked Bancroft, thanked the voters, and played the role of gracious star to perfection. If you didn't know better, you'd think she'd won the award herself. And maybe, in her mind, she had. And in the wings, the broadcast showed Bette Davis watching, her face a study in devastation and rage. The anguished expression, the barely contained fury, the visible pain of having her moment stolen. It was all preserved on film for eternity. Makeup couldn't hide the tears forming in her eyes. Her hands clenched into fists. For just a moment, the camera caught her mouthing something. 2 words that looked like an obscenity, directed at Crawford's back. But Crawford wasn't finished. Later that evening, in the press room where reporters were still conducting filmed interviews, Davis made no attempt to hide her feelings. When asked about Crawford's performance in Baby Jane, Davis delivered her verdict with surgical precision. She called Crawford's acting amateur at best. She described Crawford's need for attention as desperate and pathetic. She suggested that Crawford's inability to accept that she was no longer a major star was sad to watch. "She's playing to empty seats now," Davis told one reporter, her voice dripping with contempt. "The audience left years ago, but Joan keeps performing. She can't help herself. She needs applause like other people need oxygen. Without it, she'd simply cease to exist." The reporters, sensing blood in the water, pressed for more. Davis obliged, her bitterness pouring out in a torrent of cutting remarks that were all recorded on camera. She talked for 20 minutes, the words flowing faster as her anger built. By the end, she was chain-smoking, lighting each new cigarette from the fading ember of the last, her famous eyes blazing with rage. The wire service photos of Davis's anguished face in the wings became iconic images of Hollywood cruelty. Crawford's victory was complete from a tactical standpoint. She'd denied Davis the Oscar and stolen the spotlight. But it made her look petty and vindictive to an industry that values at least the appearance of grace. The feud intensified after that night, becoming more public and more vicious. They would never reconcile. For the next 14 years, they refused to speak. If they encountered each other at industry events, they would turn and walk in opposite directions. Friends learned never to mention one name in front of the other. The hatred became a defining fact of their lives, consuming energy that could have gone to their craft, their families, their happiness. When Crawford passed away in 1977, Davis refused to attend the funeral. When asked for a comment, Davis delivered one final cut. "You should never say bad things about the departed, only good. Joan Crawford is gone. Good." The tragedy wasn't just the wasted energy of two brilliant actresses consumed by mutual hatred. It was that whatever happened to Baby Jane had revived both their careers, giving them a second act when Hollywood had written them off. Instead of celebrating their shared triumph, they spent their remaining years poisoning what should have been a professional renaissance. Television recorded it all. The petty revenge, the public humiliation, the bitter aftermath. Two legends reduced to bitter rivals fighting over scraps, unable to see past their egos to the artistry they'd created together. Crawford and Davis were famous enemies whose hatred was almost expected, woven into Hollywood lore. But what about the cruelty between people who were supposed to be friends, mentors, and protectors? What happened when the mask of friendship slipped and revealed something far colder beneath? Joan Rivers was about to discover that even 20 years of loyalty meant nothing when you wounded Johnny Carson's ego. Johnny Carson destroys Rivers. Joan Rivers worshipped Johnny Carson. When she started appearing on The Tonight Show in the late 1960s, she was a struggling comic whose brash style hadn't quite found an audience. She'd been rejected by every club in New York, told she wasn't pretty enough, wasn't feminine enough, wasn't funny enough. Carson saw something in her. He invited her back again and again, giving her the platform that transformed her from an unknown into a star. By 1983, she'd become his permanent guest host, filling in whenever Carson took one of his frequent vacations. She hosted 93 times over 3 years. She called him almost nightly for advice. She'd save jokes just to test them with him first, and valued his opinion more than anyone's in the industry. Her own father had never understood her ambition, never supported her career. Carson filled that void. He believed in her when no one else did. She trusted him completely. In 1986, Fox offered Rivers her own late-night talk show, The Late Show starring Joan Rivers, which would compete directly with The Tonight Show. Fox was offering her everything she'd ever wanted: creative control, a huge salary, her name on the door. After decades of being the opening act, she'd finally headline. How could she say no? But there was a problem. Protocol dictated that she tell Carson first, in person or at least over the phone. She tried. She called his private line. He didn't answer. She left messages. He didn't return them. She called 6 times that day alone, her panic growing with each unanswered ring. Finally, with Fox pressuring her for a decision, she accepted the offer. But Fox announced the deal before she had the chance to tell him. Carson heard about Rivers' new show the same way the rest of America did, through the press. He was having breakfast when his publicist called, reading him the headline from Variety. He didn't say anything at first, just set down his coffee cup very carefully, very slowly. Then he hung up the phone. The first Tonight Show after the announcement, Carson opened with his monologue. His tone was light, his smile in place. But anyone who knew him recognized the edge beneath the charm. "You know what's funny about show business?" he said, his smile never wavering. "You think you know people. You think you've helped someone, given them opportunities, treated them like family. And then you read about their new show in the trades, just like everyone else." The audience laughed nervously. Some people didn't laugh at all. Rivers, watching from home, felt her stomach drop. Her husband, Edgar, had to physically restrain her from getting in the car and driving to Burbank. "Let me talk to him," she kept saying. "If I can just talk to him, I can make him understand." But Edgar knew better. This one was permanent. The permanent ban came swiftly. Rivers would never appear on The Tonight Show again. Not as a guest, not as a host, not ever. Carson used his considerable industry influence to spread the word. Booking Joan Rivers meant choosing between her and Carson, and nobody in their right mind chose against the king of late night. When Rivers' Fox show struggled and was canceled after 7 months, Carson's satisfaction was evident. "I see some shows didn't make it this season," he said during one monologue, his timing impeccable. "Guess not everyone can handle the pressure of their own show. Some people are better as opening acts." The audience roared. Rivers, watching at home, felt the knife twist. On her worst night, after the cancellation was announced and her husband Edgar had passed away from the stress and humiliation, Rivers received flowers at her home. The arrangement was enormous, expensive. Funeral flowers that seemed designed to mock rather than comfort. The card read simply, "From your friends at NBC." It wasn't signed, but everyone knew who'd sent it. Rivers kept the card in her desk drawer for the rest of her life, unable to throw it away, unable to forget. For 28 years, until Carson passed away in 2005, Rivers tried to reconcile. She reached out through mutual friends. She sent letters. She wrote to him on his birthday every year. She sent him notes when his mother passed away, when his son perished, when he announced his retirement. Every letter came back unopened. When he passed away, Rivers was not invited to the funeral. In her autobiography, published in 2014, shortly before her own passing, Rivers described the loss of Carson's friendship as like losing family. The wound never healed. The cruelty of Carson's response went beyond the immediate pain of losing a mentor. It was the double standard that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Jay Leno had left The Tonight Show in 1992 to host his own show. Carson sent him a congratulatory telegram. Arsenio Hall launched his competing late-night show in 1989. Carson appeared as a guest, lending his blessing. David Letterman left for CBS in 1993. Carson publicly praised him and sent cases of wine to celebrate. Each of these men had done exactly what Rivers did, taken a better offer, pursued their ambitions, and each of them was forgiven, even celebrated for it. Joan Rivers did exactly what they did, and was exiled forever. The gender dynamics were impossible to ignore. What the broadcast preserved in those post-announcement Tonight Show monologues was Carson's public execution of someone who trusted him. And Johnny Carson, for all his charm and wit, had a vindictive streak that television audiences rarely saw. Behind the warm smile that America loved was something much colder. If you're fascinated by these shocking moments from television history, subscribe to Golden Age Files. We uncover the untold stories from Hollywood's most glamorous and most brutal era. Carson's calculated exile was wielded quietly through industry power. But what happened when television caught cruelty of a different kind? The systematic exploitation of desperate people who needed money more than they needed dignity? Before game shows had ethics departments and contestant protections, there was You Bet Your Life, where America's funniest comedian systematically humiliated vulnerable people for laughs, and nobody stopped him. Groucho Marx humiliates contestants. You Bet Your Life premiered on NBC in 1950, pairing comedian Groucho Marx with ordinary Americans competing for prize money by answering questions. Groucho's rapid-fire wit, his lascivious one-liners, his ability to improvise comedy from any topic made him a television star in his 50s. The show ran for 11 years, becoming one of the most popular programs on television. Families would gather around their television sets every Thursday night, parents shushing children so they wouldn't miss Groucho's next zinger. What audiences were actually watching was often a wealthy celebrity systematically mocking working-class people for the entertainment of middle-class viewers. The show was filmed, not broadcast live, but editing was minimal. Groucho's ad-libs stayed in. His put-downs remained. And because he was Groucho Marx, because he was funny, because it was all presented as good-natured ribbing, the cruelty was disguised as entertainment. The producers deliberately booked contestants they knew Groucho could mock. Overweight people, uneducated people, people with thick accents or obvious insecurities. The more vulnerable the contestant, the better the comedy. A woman who was noticeably overweight came on the show. Groucho looked her up and down and asked, "When you stand up, do they have to use a crane?" The audience laughed. The woman smiled, but her eyes showed the humiliation. Her husband had been injured at work 3 months earlier and couldn't return to his job. Workers' compensation had run out. The mortgage was 2 months behind. She'd come on the show hoping to win enough to cover their mortgage payment. She endured the jokes about her weight, about her appearance. Groucho didn't relent. "How do you get through doorways?" he asked. "Do you have to turn sideways? Or do they just widen the doors for you?" The audience roared. She kept smiling. She had no choice. A man who worked as a garbage collector appeared. Groucho listened to him speak and then commented, "So you're a garbage collector. I can tell by the way you talk. Or should I say, by the way you can't talk." The audience roared. His daughter needed dental work, expensive braces that the family couldn't afford on a sanitation worker's salary. He was trying to do right by his daughter. And this was the only way he could think of to get the money. Groucho made jokes about his grammar, his profession, and his lack of education. "I bet your vocabulary is limited to trash, garbage, and dump, right?" Groucho said. "Or am I using words that are too big for you?" The man laughed along, but his jaw was tight, his smile forced. Female contestants faced a different kind of humiliation. Groucho was famous for his innuendos, but with women who were young or attractive, the comments often crossed into something more uncomfortable. "Are you married?" he'd ask, waggling his eyebrows. "No? Well, that's a shame. A girl who looks like you shouldn't spend her nights alone." The women would laugh nervously, trapped between needing the prize money and being made into objects of mockery on national television. The power dynamic made resistance impossible. Groucho controlled whether contestants got easy questions or difficult ones, whether they won money or went home empty-handed. One contestant who tried to push back, who said, "I don't appreciate that," when Groucho mocked his accent, suddenly found himself getting impossibly difficult questions. He went home with nothing. The message was clear. Accept the humiliation or lose your chance at money you desperately needed. In 1954, a woman named Charlotte Stevens appeared on the show. Groucho spent 15 minutes making jokes about her weight. She smiled through it all, laughed at the right moments, and played a good sport. She won $500. Her daughter, interviewed decades later in 2003, said her mother never watched television again after that night. Mom would leave the room if Groucho Marx came on TV, her daughter recalled. She wouldn't explain why. She'd just say she didn't feel well and go to her bedroom. Sometimes I'd hear her crying in there. I never understood why until years later when I found an old videotape of the show and watched it. Then I understood. I threw the tape away. Mom never knew I'd seen it. The money paid for a month's rent and was gone. But Charlotte would fast forward through family videos that showed her laughing on that stage, unable to watch herself smile through humiliation. Newspapers praised Groucho's wit. Critics celebrated the show's success. "Groucho Marx is a national treasure," one wrote. "His spontaneous humor makes You Bet Your Life appointment viewing for millions of families." The cruelty was invisible to them, or maybe they just didn't care. The show's episodes still exist, preserved on film. You can watch the forced smiles, the visible discomfort, the humiliation disguised as good-natured ribbing. Many contestants later said they still remembered the humiliation, still heard the audience laughing at their weight, their education, their poverty. The prize money had been spent in weeks. The shame had lasted a lifetime. Groucho's cruelty exploited economic vulnerability, targeting people who couldn't fight back. But institutional power could be even more devastating. When a single man controlled access to millions of viewers, his vindictiveness could destroy careers with a single pronouncement. Ed Sullivan threatens Jackie Mason. Ed Sullivan had been hosting his variety show on CBS since 1948. By the early 1960s, the Ed Sullivan Show was an American institution. Sunday night at 8 o'clock, 70 million viewers tuned in to watch whatever Sullivan had booked. Rock bands, comedians, Broadway performers, circus acts. An appearance on Sullivan could make a career overnight. Elvis Presley, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, they all passed through Sullivan's stage. And Sullivan controlled it all with an iron fist. He decided who appeared, who got cut, who came back. Performers would literally beg their agents for a Sullivan booking, knowing that one appearance could mean the difference between obscurity and stardom. Comedians who'd been grinding away in small clubs for years could suddenly command 5 times their usual fee after a successful Sullivan appearance. Singers could see their records shoot up the charts overnight. Sullivan held the keys to success, and he knew it. Cross Sullivan, and you didn't just lose a spot on his show. You could lose your career. Jackie Mason had been a regular guest on the Ed Sullivan Show, building his reputation as a comedian through multiple appearances. His observational humor about Jewish culture and New York life was finding an audience. Sullivan liked him enough to keep booking him. Mason's career was finally taking off. He'd graduated from dingy basement clubs to respectable venues. His fee had quadrupled in 2 years. He was starting to make real money, save for the future, provide for his family the way he'd always wanted. Then came September 18th, 1964. President Lyndon Johnson was scheduled to give a televised address to the nation. Networks were required to carry it. Sullivan's show would be interrupted mid-broadcast. Mason was on stage performing his routine when the stage manager began signaling from the wings. Mason focused on his act and the audience response. Noticed, but didn't understand what was happening. He held up 2 fingers, asking the stage manager how many minutes until they had to cut away for the presidential address. It was an innocent gesture, a performer trying to time his material. Someone backstage would later say Mason looked confused, like he was trying to figure out if he had time for one more joke or should wrap up early. He was squinting into the wings, trying to read the stage manager's signals under the bright lights. But Sullivan, watching from backstage, interpreted it differently. His face went red. His hands clenched into fists. People standing near him took a step back, unsettled by the sudden shift in his demeanor. He became convinced that Mason had made an obscene gesture directed at him personally. When the show returned from the presidential address, Sullivan was furious. In the following weeks, he went on his own show and publicly denounced Jackie Mason to an audience of millions. He told viewers that Mason had made an obscene gesture to him. He called Mason unprofessional and disrespectful. And then he delivered the threat that would haunt Mason for years. He will never work on this show or any other show again if I have anything to say about it. The camera held on Sullivan's face as he said it. His expression was cold, final, absolute. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't showmanship. This was a sentence being passed. Sullivan had plenty to say about it. The blacklist was swift and comprehensive. Variety shows that might have booked Mason suddenly had no openings. Nightclub owners who'd been scheduling him canceled his contracts. Mason's agent stopped returning his calls within a week. When Mason finally got the agent on the phone, the man was apologetic but firm. "I can't represent you anymore, Jackie. I've got other clients to think about. If I book you anywhere, Sullivan will remember. He'll punish everyone who works with you, and I can't afford that. I'm sorry." The line went silent. Other performers watched and learned what happened when you crossed Ed Sullivan. Even accidentally, even when you'd done nothing wrong. Mason's income collapsed. The bookings dried up. The career he'd been building for years evaporated in weeks. Mason tried to defend himself. He explained that the gesture was innocent, that he'd been asking the stage manager about timing. He pointed out that Sullivan hadn't even been on stage at the time, couldn't possibly have been the target of anything. He went to newspapers, to television critics, to anyone who would listen. He showed them photos of himself on stage at that exact moment, demonstrating how the stage lights would have made it impossible for him to even see Sullivan backstage. None of it mattered. None of it mattered. Sullivan had pronounced judgment on national television, and in an era when 3 networks controlled all of television and a handful of powerful figures controlled the industry, Sullivan's word was law. Jackie Mason would later say that the worst part wasn't losing the money or the bookings. It was explaining to his children why their father couldn't provide like he used to. It was watching venues that had welcomed him suddenly go silent. His son remembered coming home from school to find his father sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the afternoon, just staring at the bills. Dad never sat still during the day, his son said decades later. He was always working, always moving, always hustling for the next gig. That's when I knew something was really wrong. I was 12 years old, and I remember thinking my dad looked old suddenly. Defeated, like something inside him had broken. Eventually, he filed a defamation lawsuit against Sullivan and CBS, seeking $2 million in damages. The case was settled out of court, with terms that were never publicly disclosed. Slowly, painfully, Mason rebuilt his career, but he lost years, lost momentum, lost opportunities that never came back. Ed Sullivan never thought about Mason's family when he pronounced his judgment, but they paid the price. What television had documented was the moment of Sullivan's public execution. The threat delivered on national television wasn't idle. It was a demonstration of power, a message to every other performer about what happened when Sullivan decided you were finished. The avuncular host who introduced America to the Beatles had another side, vindictive and cruel, willing to destroy careers over perceived slights. Sullivan's institutional power could destroy careers with pronouncements from on high, backed by the might of CBS and the 3-network oligopoly. But what happened when rage couldn't be contained? When a beloved icon lost control so completely, the cameras caught him threatening one of television's most respected journalists? Frank Sinatra was about to show America what lay beneath the chairman of the board's smooth exterior. Frank Sinatra attacks Barbara Walters. Frank Sinatra was standing now, leaning across the table toward Barbara Walters, his finger jabbing toward her face like a weapon. "Who do you think you are?" The chairman of the board wasn't singing anymore. He was snarling. His face was contorted with rage. A vein pulsed in his forehead. Spit flew as he shouted. His eyes were wild, dangerous. The studio audience sat in shocked silence. You could hear someone's chair creak. Nobody moved. Everyone was afraid to breathe, afraid that any sound might set him off further. How had one of America's most beloved entertainers ended up threatening one of its most respected journalists on camera? It started 30 minutes earlier. Sinatra had been managing his public image since the 1940s. By 1976, his image was carefully calibrated. The chairman of the board, sophisticated and smooth. A little dangerous, but ultimately charming. He'd spent decades perfecting the persona, investing millions in publicity. Barbara Walters had been vetted, approved, deemed safe. Or so his people thought. The interview was supposed to be a softball promotion for his latest album. At first, the conversation went smoothly. Sinatra was charming, telling anecdotes, making Walters laugh. He'd brought her flowers before the interview, orchids from his own garden, kissed her hand like old Hollywood royalty. "Barbara, you look beautiful," he'd said, his voice warm, his smile genuine. The crew relaxed. But Walters, already building her reputation for asking the questions other interviewers avoided, had other plans. She knew the public was fascinated by Sinatra's alleged connections to organized crime. She also knew that asking about it directly would provoke him. Her producers had advised against it. "Don't go there," they'd warned. "He'll walk out, or worse." But Walters hadn't built her career by playing it safe. She asked anyway. At first, Sinatra tried to deflect with humor. But Walters persisted, asking follow-up questions about specific individuals, specific incidents, the FBI files that documented his associations. With each question, Sinatra's composure cracked a little more. You could see the transformation happening in real time. The charm drained from his face. His shoulders tensed, his hands formed fists. The crew knew what was coming before it happened. And then he exploded. He called her a two-bit reporter trying to make a name for herself by attacking him. He demanded to know who she thought she was. He used gendered insults that made the studio audience gasp, calling her pushy and worse. He threatened to walk off the set. "We're done here," he said, starting to remove his microphone. But Walters kept her eyes on him, kept her composure, and he sat back down. He wasn't finished. He promised to make sure she never worked again, that he'd use every connection he had to destroy her career. "I know people," he said. And the way he said it, quiet, cold, menacing, made it clear this wasn't an idle threat. Important people. People who can make things happen or not happen. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? His eyes bored into hers, searching for fear, for proof that he'd won. The footage recorded it all. The rage contorting his face, the threatening posture, the finger pointed at Walters like a weapon. Walters, to her eternal credit, never flinched. She maintained her professional composure, her expression neutral, her voice calm. Later, she would tell friends her hands were shaking so badly she had to sit on them to keep the trembling from showing on camera. But her voice stayed steady. Her gaze never wavered. She'd done hundreds of interviews with powerful, dangerous men. She knew the playbook. Show fear and you lose. Show strength and they respect you. Oh, she didn't apologize or back down. She simply waited for him to finish, then asked her next question. Eventually, Sinatra regained enough control to continue the interview, but the damage was done. The footage existed. The mask had slipped. When the interview aired, it was heavily edited. Network executives had gotten nervous. Sinatra's lawyers had called, threatening legal action. In the end, the broadcast version was sanitized, but enough remained to show viewers that old Blue Eyes had a temper, that the smooth sophistication was a performance. Years later, when the fuller footage became available, it was even more damning. The sophisticate was revealed as a bully. Television had preserved it all. Unlike the carefully crafted image Sinatra had spent decades building, this moment was spontaneous and honest. The rage was real. The threats were real. No amount of editing could completely hide what the broadcast had documented. A beloved icon revealing himself capable of shocking cruelty when his ego was challenged. Which of these cruel moments shocked you most? Do you remember watching any of these incidents when they first aired? Share your memories in the comments and tell us what other aspects of classic Hollywood's television era you'd like us to explore. Sinatra's explosion was spontaneous rage. But some stars weaponized their insecurity and fear, attacking anyone who reminded them they were aging and fading from relevance. Before there were reality TV villains, before Twitter feuds, there was Tallulah Bankhead. And what she did to other actresses on live television makes today's social media attacks look tame. Tallulah Bankhead's vicious campaign. Tallulah Bankhead had been Broadway royalty in the 1920s and 30s. Her performances in plays like The Little Foxes and The Skin of Our Teeth were legendary. Her personality was even more famous. The raspy voice from years of cigarettes and whiskey, the outrageous behavior, the scandalous love life. The bon mots delivered with perfectly timed venom. She was a personality before the word meant what it means today. A figure who transcended her actual work to become a cultural icon. By the 1950s, as stage roles became scarce and her film career never quite materialized, she turned to television. Game shows, variety shows, talk shows, any program that would book her. She'd show up hours early, already with a drink in hand, already armed with cutting remarks she'd practiced in her dressing room mirror. Her assistant would find notes scattered around the room, names of actresses, prepared insults, jokes designed to wound. She was weaponizing her wit, preparing for battle. And what audiences got wasn't just Tallulah's wit. They got her cruelty, her insecurity, and her desperate need to stay relevant by destroying anyone she perceived as a threat. On a 1950s talk show whose name is lost to time but whose footage survives, Bankhead was asked about a rising film star. Her response was swift and cutting. Talented? Darling, that girl has roughly the same amount of talent as a department store mannequin. Actually, less. The mannequin at least has better posture. The audience laughed. The host moved on. But the actress being discussed was just starting her career. Bankhead's nationally televised put-down would follow her. Years later, that actress told an interviewer that she'd seriously considered quitting acting after hearing what Tallulah had said. I was 22 years old, just trying to make it. And suddenly, Broadway royalty is telling America I'm worthless, she recalled, tears forming even decades later. It took me years to get my confidence back. I'd be in auditions and I'd hear Tallulah's voice in my head. Less than a mannequin. I started believing it. I almost gave up my dream because Tallulah Bankhead decided I wasn't worthy. On What's My Line, the long-running game show where celebrity panelists tried to guess contestants' occupations, Bankhead served as a guest panelist. Another female panelist, a well-known actress, was seated beside her. During a break in filming, cameras still rolling, Bankhead made a comment loud enough for the microphones to catch. She should work in radio where no one has to look at that face. The other panelist's face went pale. Her hands trembled. She tried to maintain her smile, but her eyes filled with tears. After the show, she locked herself in her dressing room and refused to come out for an hour. The audience's laughter was uncomfortable. The other panelist's smile was frozen. But Bankhead was Tallulah Bankhead. This was just how she was. Outrageous, unfiltered, impossible. The Mike Wallace interview in the late 1950s brought a parade of celebrities before Wallace's unsparing questions. Bankhead appeared intoxicated, her speech slurred, her inhibitions completely gone. Wallace tried to get her to drink some coffee, tried to delay the interview, but Bankhead insisted. "I'm ready, darling," she said, lighting another cigarette even though one was already burning in the ashtray. "Let's do this." When Wallace asked about a young starlet who'd recently earned good reviews, Bankhead's contempt poured out. My dear, she couldn't act her way out of a paper bag if someone gave her a map and a flashlight. She's pretty, I'll give you that. So is my Cocker Spaniel. Neither of them should be on stage. The specificity of the attack, the calculated cruelty of comparing another actress to a dog, it went beyond mere criticism into something uglier. Bankhead targeted younger actresses, beautiful actresses, anyone who might be getting more attention than her. Her weapons were wit and her willingness to say anything, to violate any boundary of professional courtesy or basic kindness. She attacked their looks, their talent, their right to even call themselves actresses. And because it was funny, because she delivered the lines with perfect timing and that magnificent voice, audiences laughed. They didn't think about the careers being damaged, the confidence being destroyed, the cruelty being broadcast to millions. Producers began to notice a problem. Actresses refused to appear on shows if Bankhead was scheduled. The calculation was simple. Risk being humiliated on national television by Tallulah Bankhead, or just decline the booking? Most chose to decline. Agents would call producers asking a single question. Is Tallulah booked? If the answer was yes, the client wasn't interested. Producers started having to choose. Book Tallulah and lose everyone else, or skip Tallulah and book actual panels. Bankhead's appearances became increasingly solo affairs. The panels that used to feature multiple celebrities became just Tallulah and the host. The variety shows that might have booked her for ensemble segments put her in standalone spots. She was being isolated, walled off from the very industry she'd once dominated. Her final years in the 1960s were marked by loneliness. The friends had fallen away, repelled by her cruelty or exhausted by her neediness. The professional opportunities dwindled. The younger generation of performers had no interest in working with someone who treated them as targets rather than colleagues. She'd call people at 3 in the morning, rambling and insisting she was still relevant, still important, still Tallulah Bankhead. They'd make excuses and hang up. Eventually, they stopped answering. When Tallulah Bankhead passed away in 1968, the industry acknowledgement was respectful but distant. Few of her targets attended the funeral. The woman who'd used her wit as a weapon had made herself unlovable. The tragedy of Bankhead's television years was the transparency of her motivation. She was terrified of aging, of becoming irrelevant, of being forgotten, and so she tried to remain relevant by destroying others, by being so outrageous and cruel that people had to pay attention to her. It worked in a way. People did pay attention. They watched her television appearances the way you watch a car accident, unable to look away from the spectacle of someone losing control. But the attention came at the cost of respect, friendship, and ultimately her legacy. She's remembered as much for her cruelty as her talent. A cautionary tale about what fear can do to genuine brilliance. Bankhead's cruelty came from fear and insecurity consuming her from within, turning her wit into a weapon against anyone who reminded her she was fading. Our final story shows how that same fear and bitterness could consume even the most legendary stars, turning them into weapons against everyone around them. Bette Davis's decades-long destruction. Bette Davis had earned her legend. 2 Academy Awards, 10 nominations, performances that defined what film acting could be. Jezebel, Dark Victory, All About Eve, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. She'd fought the studio system, walked out on Warner Brothers, sued for the right to choose her own projects, and won respect through sheer force of talent and will. By the 1970s, though, the film roles had dried up. Television became her primary platform. Talk shows, interviews, retrospectives. And what America discovered was that one of Hollywood's greatest actresses had spent her later years consumed by bitterness, using television appearances to systematically destroy other actresses in a campaign of cruelty that spanned decades. She'd arrive at studios carrying a cocktail in a paper cup, chain-smoking between segments, her famous eyes scanning the room for potential rivals. Staff learned to stay out of her way, to avoid eye contact, to never mention another actress's name in her presence. The Dick Cavett Show in 1971 featured Davis as a guest, ostensibly to promote whatever television movie she had coming out. Cavett, known for his intelligent interviews and literary sensibility, tried to steer the conversation toward Davis's artistic process and her legendary performances. Davis had other plans. The conversation turned to Faye Dunaway, who'd just been cast in a television adaptation of one of Davis's signature roles. Davis's verdict was swift and devastating. Utterly talentless, an absolute bore. That girl couldn't act her way through a cereal commercial if someone gave her the script, the blocking, and a team of assistants. The audience laughed nervously. Cavett visibly flinched, tried to interject, but Davis kept going, her voice rising, her words getting sharper. She was on a roll now, and nothing was going to stop her. The audience laughed nervously. Cavett tried to move on. Davis wasn't finished. She elaborated on Dunaway's shortcomings, her lack of craft, her reliance on beauty rather than skill. It was a masterclass in professional destruction, delivered with Davis's characteristic intensity. Marilyn Monroe had passed away in 1962, but that didn't stop Davis from attacking her memory on multiple talk shows throughout the 70s. On The Tonight Show, when asked about Monroe, Davis's response was cutting. A movie star? Certainly. An actress? Never. She didn't know the first thing about the craft. She left this world thinking she'd convinced people she could act. Carson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Even he, who'd executed Joan Rivers with such cold efficiency, found Davis's posthumous attacks unseemly. But she kept going. On another program, Davis elaborated. She left us thinking she'd fooled everyone. She hadn't. She was simply a movie star, there's a difference. The posthumous attacks felt particularly cruel. Monroe couldn't defend herself, couldn't respond, couldn't even know she was being savaged. The Tonight Show welcomed Davis multiple times, and each appearance seemed to feature attacks on contemporary actresses. They don't know the meaning of the word craft, Davis declared on one show. They point their chests at the camera and call it a performance. It's not acting, it's posing. She said this while gesturing crudely, making sure everyone understood exactly what she meant. The audience's laughter was uncomfortable, uncertain. When Johnny Carson asked about specific actresses, Davis obliged with cutting assessments. This one was wooden. That one couldn't deliver a line to save her life. Another one had gotten roles through connections rather than talent. The specificity of the attacks, the obvious pleasure Davis took in diminishing others, It went beyond mere criticism into something more personal and ugly. Joan Crawford had passed away in 1977, but Davis continued appearing on talk shows to savage her rival's memory. On show after show, Davis told stories about Crawford's vanity, her insecurity, her professional jealousy. Joan lived as she left us, Davis said on one show. Desperate for attention, clinging to a career that had already abandoned her, pretending the audience still cared. They didn't. They'd moved on decades ago. Joan never noticed. She described Crawford as a mediocre talent who'd succeeded through manipulation rather than skill. She mocked Crawford's obsession with her appearance, her desperate need for approval, her inability to accept aging gracefully. Crawford couldn't respond, couldn't defend herself, couldn't even know that Davis was spending years after Crawford passed destroying her reputation on national television. Davis attacked beautiful actresses, suggesting their looks had substituted for talent. She attacked method actors, dismissing their technique as pretentious nonsense. She attacked her contemporaries, diminishing their achievements to elevate her own. She attacked actresses from younger generations, suggesting they didn't measure up to the standards of her era. And she did it all on camera, in interviews that were watched by millions, creating a permanent record of her bitterness. Younger actresses learned to dread the inevitable comparison. If you were a talented dramatic actress in the 70s or 80s, you'd eventually be compared to Bette Davis. And then, if Davis heard about it, she'd appear on a talk show and explain why you didn't measure up, why you lacked her commitment or skill, why your generation had lowered the bar. The attacks weren't just professional criticism. They were personal, cutting, designed to wound and diminish. Publicists would warn their clients, if you're compared to Bette Davis in a review, don't celebrate. Start preparing for the attack. It's coming. What made Davis's behavior particularly tragic was the contrast with how other legends handled aging. Katharine Hepburn, Davis's contemporary and equal in terms of achievement, spent her later years being gracious about younger actresses. When asked about Meryl Streep or Jane Fonda, Hepburn would praise their dedication and talent. She found ways to stay relevant without destroying others, remaining a respected elder stateswoman of the craft until her final years. But Davis couldn't do it. The same fierce competitiveness that had driven her to greatness, that had made her fight for better roles and more respect, had curdled into bitterness. She couldn't celebrate others without feeling diminished. She couldn't share the spotlight without attacking those who stood in it. The last interview Bette Davis gave was in 1989, months before she passed away. The host asked if she had any regrets. Davis thought for a long moment. Her famous eyes, those eyes that had conveyed so much on screen, suddenly looking tired and old. She took a long drag on her cigarette, stubbed it out, lit another. The silence stretched. The host waited. The crew waited. The audience waited. Everyone could feel something important was about to happen. Then she said quietly, "I wish I'd been kinder." The camera held on her face. For the first time in decades of television appearances, Bette Davis looked vulnerable, human, sad. "I wish I'd been kinder," she repeated, so softly it was almost a whisper. The footage exists, but by then, it was too late to take back decades of cruelty preserved on tape. If this exploration of television's darker moments moved you, please like this video and share it with others who appreciate honest examinations of Hollywood history. These stories deserve to be remembered. Not to condemn, but to understand the human cost of fame and the permanent nature of words caught on camera. These 8 moments show us something television captured that couldn't be taken back. Buckley's slur caught on live television, 10 million witnesses to a moral collapse. Crawford's perfume lingering in the wings while Davis mouthed obscenities at her back. Carson's funeral flowers arrived with that unsigned card. From your friends at NBC. The cruelty gift wrapped and delivered. Charlotte Stevens crying alone in her bedroom decades later, unable to watch herself on screen, the $500 long spent, but the shame still fresh. Mason's 12-year-old son found his father defeated at the kitchen table in the middle of the afternoon, staring at unpaid bills, looking suddenly old and broken. Sinatra's finger jabbed toward Walter's face while the crew held their breath, afraid any sound would turn his rage toward them. Bankhead's handwritten notes scattered across her dressing room. Names of actresses, prepared insults, weapons made of words. Davis's final whisper in her last interview, barely audible. "I wish I'd been kinder." The camera preserves everything. The rage, the calculation, the petty revenge, the systematic destruction. And decades later, we can watch these moments and see exactly who these legends were when the mask slipped. Not the polished stars we thought we knew. Not the carefully managed images their publicists crafted. But human beings are capable of shocking cruelty when ego, fear, or power, went unchecked. Some regretted it. Buckley's wife found him at 3 in the morning, rewriting arguments he should have made, responses that would have preserved his dignity. Davis wished she'd been kinder, but only after the cameras had recorded decades of bitterness. But the damage was done. The footage existed, and the people they hurt. Rivers kept that card in her desk drawer for 28 years until she passed away, unable to throw it away, unable to forget. Stevens fast-forwarding through family videos for the rest of her life, unable to watch herself smile through humiliation. Mason's son watching his father break at that kitchen table. The young actresses Bankhead destroyed before their careers even began, hearing that voice in their heads during auditions, less than a mannequin, carried those wounds for the rest of their lives. This is Golden Age Files, where we explore the full, complicated reality of an era when television was learning what it meant to wield such power over human lives and reputations. Television documented both Hollywood's greatest achievements and its cruelest moments. Both are part of the story. Both deserve to be remembered and understood. The camera never forgets, and neither should we.